Hey guys, and welcome to the Dad's Group podcast, a place where you and I get to connect with incredible leaders, shape the future of fatherhood together, and dig deeper into what is happening inside the minds and hearts of new and expecting fathers. In this episode, we are interviewing the CEO of PANDA, Julie Borninkof. PANDA is dedicated to supporting the mental health and well-being of expecting, new, and growing families. I hope you guys enjoy.
Today, Julie, we're going to interview you. We're going to get a bit to know you a bit better. I'm going to kick off with a question a little bit around your work. So you can tell us a little bit about your work. This is kind of like a yarning circle or a you can sit down and enjoy each other's companies and share some stories. So take the questions as you'd like, respond in a way that you feel relaxed, and tell us a little bit about your work and why you're passionate about it, Julie.
Oh, where do I start, Tom? I think, as an organisation, I became the CEO and, the custodian in many ways of an amazing organisation in late 2019. PANDA is an organisation that next year is 40 years old. So we've been around for a significant amount of time. And when you become the leader of an organisation that has had such a rich lifeblood and such deep roots from community, your role is a really important one to make sure that you're honouring and respecting the past, that you're building a stable foundation that works for the community right now and setting it up for success in the future. So I personally find the work that the organisation does as really exciting. But also very much honouring where we came from. So, 40 years ago next year, we were born in community out of, two women who had an extreme experience of mental vulnerability during the perinatal period, who were supported by their partners to come together and have a community session where they spoke about their experience. And I have a barking dog next door, so you're going to have to put up with that. But they spoke about their experience together and suddenly realised that they weren't alone. And a community event soon became overwhelming in terms of the number of people that came together to be able to share a conversation about their experience and how the service system was or wasn't meeting their needs. And the similarities and the impacts it had on who they were and wanted to be as a family. So PANDA was born a long time ago. We were predominantly funded for lived experience, so services delivered via peer modalities or with people, volunteering on a helpline, and have grown and grown from there to where we are now the, largest national provider of the perinatal mental health helpline for mums and dads across the country. We do amazing work beyond that, though. We are really committed to ensuring that we are building really down-to-earth resources and educating and training health professionals across the country to be the best providers of care and support that they can be, and to seize every opportunity that they have with mums and dads and everyone in between, including grandparents and elders and, aunts and uncles and whomever, to be able to support people and identify vulnerability and catch it early so that people can be the parents they want to be.
Fantastic. Well, that's it's actually really nice and special to hear the roots of the organisation and those stories of where that came out. Admittedly, I didn't know that, so it's nice to have that story and that narrative around those mothers who were, in need of support, and also you mentioned the partners who supported them in that. And we're going to get into a little bit more about partner support, or the way in which fathers can be involved. But before we do, Julie, can I ask you a question about fatherhood? And if I say to you, what are the things that come up in your mind or your heart and your experiences as possibly as a child, or possibly seeing or being with someone who is a father of your child, or possibly seeing other people interact in that fatherhood role model? Open-ended question. When I say fatherhood, tell us what comes to mind.
I think first and foremost, two things, most definitely, and that is I feel very privileged to have had, I think, the most amazing father, and my dad is my rock and continues to be my rock. And, he was an amazing father and is an amazing father, not because of any bells and whistles, but just because he was constant for me. He shared with me who he was authentically. He let me know that I was okay regardless of where I was in the ups and downs of my life and development. He fought for and went after the things that were important to him on a small or a large scale. And he taught me how to be a MacGyver, as we call it in our household. So, I can build anything, I can do anything, I can reconstruct my house, we can build on our block and all of those things, because my dad taught me that I was capable, even at times that I wasn't, I'm sure, So when I think about fatherhood, and the belief that individuals have in us and the importance of having that from a male figure as a woman, but also, in that sort of sharing of a role and love differently and at times vulnerably, I think that's there for me. And then the second piece to my fatherhood kind of perspective is how proud I am and thankful I am to have my partner, Dave, and I returned to work after 3 months of having my beautiful girl and, 10 years ago, and Dave was everything to Olive. And the role that he undertook, even though he was vulnerable himself at that time and questioning whether or not he was the best and doing it right and all of that, to see the relationship he formed and the special moments he had and how they continue to play out, and the trust that is there in their relationship and their attachment, even though he, became overwhelmed at times, is something that will always be there in my daughter's fabric and makeup. And so she has that same kind of constant now that I had, and I'm really thrilled about that. And I know that that's not everyone's experience, and I know that I am privileged in many ways to have that. But, constant comes in many forms. And if we can give people the power to understand that they don't have to be perfect and that near enough is good enough, and any little piece of constant you can give in the ups and downs of life is a valuable one, I think that's what fatherhood is to me.
Well, that is that's a really full response, and there's so many different elements of that which sound exciting. I thank you for sharing that. That I guess perspective that you had as a child, that you have, I guess growing up and the in those formative years, it sounds like those elements of support and, as you mentioned, constant connection that your father gave you, and now you see Dave, providing as well, as something that's, I guess, been, quite fundamental in your development. Would you go so far as seeing that influence now in your professional life?
Yeah, look, most definitely. My dad taught me, especially as a leader, and I continue to have conversations with him about the way I choose to work, which is really openly, authentically putting my people first and being stable and constant and equitable. Like they're the things that my dad taught me as a child, in the way that he treated me, in the way that I saw him treat the people he worked with and the relationships he had. And I still talk to my dad about the struggle sometimes with how business or how, funding relationships, when we look at organisations in a not-for-profit space, or the way in which, we try to be there for staff or our community, can really impact on bringing that authenticity and bringing that kind of stability, because the space is changing so much. So, I think that the things that my dad taught me very much reinforce who I am today as a leader in business, also as who I am as a mother, and in the relationship I have and my friendships with others. And I speak to my dad constantly about those things, and and about the stability he brought me and how to retain that in a really fluid and creative and changeable space.
That's really exciting to hear, Julie. If I was to unpack, just for those listeners who wanting to get maybe more of a grasp of what is, constant and equitable, they're respectfully, complex terms. What does it actually look like in a workplace where you're the boss, you've got people, you've got challenges, but if you're saying your father has been able to help you know what to do essentially with those principles, but what in a day-to-day work environment, what does that look like? A boss behavior, what activities, there's obviously tensions there to be able to deliver those outcomes. So what is that? Can you paint us a picture of, and I might be putting you on the spot, but what could that look like in your experience, where you have had to do those big words in a really just normal setting, or how to run me through an example of that, because I think they're great, but I really love unpacking what it could look like for someone who's listening.
Yeah, so when I talk about being, equitable and authentic, I think it's about being constant and trying to be the same for other people, and I think that the fascinating thing about workplaces or families or any relationship we have is that everyone brings such a different backpack of crap to their interactions, first and foremost, and secondly, everyone is different and unique, and that's a wonderful thing. So, being in a space where you want people to feel held in the work that they do, and as an organisation like Panda, we do such big work and we have such a large community of staff that have lived experience. So we have to honour and respect what people bring day to day, and I have to ensure that my staff know that I am stable for them, that I approach my role and I have principles that are founded and generally don't change, and at times may need to change as we adapt and evolve, but that they can rely on and that they can trust in, and that if they don't, that we'll support them to navigate that space and either find other organisations or other opportunities, or understand it and unpack it. So in my principles in business are about trying to be clear and stable, trying to be myself always, so I don't stand on ceremony. I think it's really important that people see the real me in any engagement, including these kind of engagements. I don't put on airs and graces. I am who I am. And that people know that if there is something they don't understand or something that doesn't feel right for them, that they can approach me. And, I say this to my staff all the time. I am here, I am busy, but I am here. And, the pieces in a work setting that are the hardest are when staff say, I've chosen to make this decision, or I've chosen to leave the organisation, or any of those things because I didn't get this from it, or my role wasn't what I expected, but they never had that opportunity to reach out and ask. And so I want, as a part of being a really equitable, stable and authentic leader and person in life, I want people to feel that they can approach me, that they can have those conversations, that they're safe to do so, and that as an organisation we hold individual difference, but we're clear, and that we have to be as clear internally as we are for our community externally.
Thanks, Julie. I appreciate that and understand that. Sorry, I did have a small interruption for a small human that was wanting to show me a new.
There's no issue with that.
But that's
barking dogs.
Yeah, that's just part of, I guess, Dad's group operating environment. Now, in all our other interviews also, we go into an area which I might have mentioned to you before. We like to talk about some success in the fatherhood sense. In your case, it might be motherhood, and also maybe one of a failing where you see that, we want to, show people that whilst you are the great leader that you are, the great CEO and the expert in the space of that, that support for communities at a national level and all those things, but you're also as human as others. And part of that is getting the opportunity to share an area where, in your personal life or something that relates to fatherhood or motherhood or parenting, where you could see, something that you would have liked in hindsight, you might have done differently. And you might have learned from your community. I don't want to over explain what that situation could be, but we're going to go and ask you one of those type scenarios, and then maybe a success story as well. So if you'd like to share something in that kind of areas of personal development, so to speak.
Yeah. Oh, it's a hard one. Look, I have to say that probably the most confronting experience that I've had as an individual, as somebody who's always done lots of things in my life, both, in terms of leadership, but creatively, and, I have a wide and varied work experience and background. And as a clinical psychologist who've done lots of different and great things, probably the most eye-opening and most confronting parts of my life was as a new mother. For the first time ever, I found myself in a space, and I will be quite clear about the fact that I do not consider that I have a lived experience of mental vulnerability in the perinatal period, but I was the most confronted I have ever been as an individual in having a new baby and being overwhelmed by the feelings of what I should and must be doing for this little person, and whether or not I was skilled and equipped to be able to do that. And, feeling for the first time ever that I had, no control, even though I know I have no control in life and, really only have 20% of control in any moment. It was the first time in my life where I felt completely adrift, that I, didn't have a rule book, so to speak, and that I didn't have the answers, and most of all that I couldn't rely on myself alone, so it was a real experience for me where I had to be really intimately connected in a trusting way to my husband, and in many ways, that was the first point in my life where, having been with my husband for many years prior to having our baby, that he really stepped in and showed a true, rock-like strength in terms of being able to take over and say, this is where we need to go. This is how you need to put her in the baby seat to get out of the hospital. This is how you need to be right now, and just give her over to me and be okay to sit with the emotions you're having, as a new mum. And so probably the most confronting time was having a new little bub and learning that space, and also giving over, and letting Dave step in and be that rock, and being really proud of him and, how we navigated that space together, because we have no family, in Victoria. Our family is all in WA, so we were parenting alone. So I think that taught me a lot about myself, in terms of, it's okay, you don't have to know what you're doing all of the time, that near enough is good enough, that wrapping around each other and making space for what that feels like in a different way to the partnership you've had before having a child, is really important, and that you get through it. You may not be the same person that you went into the parenting journey with but you come out of the other side one way or another. Some of us with war wounds and some without them. As with any,
all with.
Yeah, yeah, completely. But then how do you wear those? Are they badges of honor, or are they, signs of failure? And I think that's really important. So I think, probably parenting was the most confronting and overwhelming piece for me. And then what was the other part of the question?
Oh no! Before you go on, you said something there which really caught my attention. You said there was the element or the context of, essentially struggling, for use of a better term, in that kind of capability, identity space. You then said this word, or a couple of words, around giving over. And it was in that sense that it was kind of like, it sounded like it was, giving over. I wanted to understand, because, a lot of the audience in this community dads group, mums and dads, are in that space right now, whether they're 3 weeks in having a baby, or 3 weeks pre, or 3 years in. There's that constant, I guess, this is how I would do the situation, and that's not going to be possible. And there's that sense of gap, or potentially, however you want to look at it, failure. And then there's that giving over. Can you tell me, I guess I see there's a lot of value in couples being able to talk in that space, in that giving over space. Can you unpack that for me in your experience with Dave?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, yes, I can give you my perspective on it. I mean, I think the giving over is a really hard one, especially when you found yourself feeling fairly functional through life, and that you do have a sense of autonomy and control to a large degree in the way you have lived your life. I think the giving over is an interesting one, because there has to be self-trust and there has to be trust in the other person. And the trust is not an extreme. I always talk to people about trust being on a spectrum. It's not black and white. There is this niggling that perhaps I can trust somebody. There is this immense feeling of, yes, I can jump off this cliff with this person. There's all these greys in between there. And I think for me, the giving over is about the self-trust of, I can step away in this moment, I can give my baby, or I can give this situation to somebody else to alleviate some of the distress I'm experienced, to help carry the weight of it, the experience. So there's that self-trust, but there's also complete trust, or, a graded trust in the person that you are, sharing with, and that, I think, in many moments, when you give over, you don't necessarily know, because it's not a tested trust. It's a belief that you will get through it, and that this person can help you. And it's only in giving over that you reinforce and have evidence that, that was a good decision to make, which then builds and layers, like any good layered foundation or cake or anything. It takes those kind of moments where you actually give over to really build a foundation and a bedrock that provides further stability and further evidence when you get to the next challenge. Even if that didn't go well, you will still have an experience and a growth through that, as a couple or as a family or as an individual, and it's about kind of taking stock of that and using that to reinforce the next step. So I think the giving over is a really important one, especially when, somebody like me who hates to be thinking of themselves as a control freak, that kind of has to control a whole lot of things to provide support. It's a big one.
Yeah. Oh, that was amazing. Just hearing that, and in my mind, I'm going through all these different conversations, the pieces of research around what we've been researching for couples to better understand each other, and that handing over piece, which is, I can just really see how that's been a challenge and a continuous work in my relationship with Kate and our marriage and partnership, and especially in the space of parenting, which is just this ongoing chaotic boot camp of failure and and success.
But also giving over to little people, it's that thing too now. It's not just about the couple, it's now about giving over to this little person who needs to develop their own skills and their own self-trust. And I think as parents, you see that often too, that they carry the weight for these little people that will benefit so much from having the give over done to them too, and they start to develop their own sense of self and self-identity.
Oh, sorry. Did I just freeze? I think you just stopped. I thought that we froze. Yeah. I liked. We got both answers that I wanted to go for. That kind of sense of failure, and then that sense of success, and they're all building around that same notion of giving over and being incapable in some spaces, and essentially building that notion of team in your relationship in those early years. And I think by the sounds of it, in your case, those layers of trust, like you said, sometimes have been effective and worked, sometimes they haven't, and I guess that's something that's really important to note, that it's not just it all gets better all the time approach. It gets better, it gets worse, it gets better, then worse, and then and that is that space. And all of us, I believe, are in that space somewhat, and navigating that space and having it normalized by someone like yourself or another peer or a next door neighbor in that peer environment. Those environments that we catalyze and support are such strong ways to encourage and inspire parents. And I just really grateful for that sharing that you've given us. We also go on to talk a bit about a tip or encouragement for a new father. So you've seen a lot of things in your time, both professionally and personally. You've got a lot of different experiences there. What would you give as a tip?
Oh, look, I think knowing some of the data that I know from, PANDA in terms of dads' perspectives of the kind of father they'll be, and the fact that, most of our dads that complete the mental health checklist, so about 64%, fear that they're not going to be a good dad. And, knowing clinically, but also from my own experience, how disabling fear can be. Right. I think, the biggest thing that, I would give as a tip is be afraid and do it anyway, as I do for my daughter or anyone, and that is the things that are meaningful, always create fear because we want to get it right, or because we fearful of a loss. So I think being afraid and doing it anyway, and knowing that near enough's good enough in the outset of, you know, whatever it is you're trying to achieve, has to be the best tip for dads, because no one likes to mess it up. Everyone wants to avoid distress. You know, we're all pain intolerant, you know, regardless of whether it's physical, mental, or existential. So I think, you know, having a go, being afraid, doing it anyway, and seeing the fear is really just a part of how much it means to you.
I love it. Yeah, that's so good, and it's just so so relevant and practical, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to speak to experts, understand the complexity of their, you know, their education, how that replicates into their work, but also translate into just some basic things like, yeah, you fear it and do it anyway. That's something that anyone can take away. So thanks for that. The future of fatherhood could look like now. ... Before I get you to answer that, fatherhood in our culture is changing somewhat, and in a positive way. We're all having a positive influence on the ways in which fathers support mothers potentially. You know, we're going to get to after this talking about how new fathers can support their partners in that early stage with PANDA. But before we do that, the future of fatherhood could look like. Please finish this sentence, given the context of where you've seen it change in the last, I guess, 10 or 15 years.
Oh, look, when, you know, straight away, the future of fatherhood could look like what Blair's doing right now. You know, he's sitting in a work environment in front of his computer with a child on his lap, connected to enough to that moment to be physically rocking his child and, you know, working. Like, I mean, you know, if COVID has given us, you know, nothing but a leveling that has allowed us to be in our homes, and for some that's not a great thing, for some that's resulted in distress and trauma and more risk, but for many people it has allowed us to create a space where we don't miss out on some of those moments, and where we actually get to hold our kids more, and where we actually get to witness change differently. So, you know, I think that the future of fatherhood is one where there is space made for them to connect, where it is okay to have the myriad of emotions and physical and mental experiences that come with connecting with being a new parent, regardless of whether you label yourself a father or not. And that, you know, advocating for yourself in that and building an identity around that is A-OK, is just, I think, really important.
Wow, thanks, Julie. That was awesome. And yeah, just to be able to have, you know, an example of what that looks like, you know, on screen, off screen, you know, segueing in, segueing out in the fatherhood space. I think, you know, having workplaces that are father friendly, family friendly is critical to the future of a positive fatherhood. And yeah, it looks like, you know, Blair is demonstrating that in a great way. So good on you, Blair. Keep it up. Hopefully, you know, all fathers would have that.
If only you had another set of hands right now.
He definitely doesn't. Yeah, and then, yeah, the last part, Julie, is just, you know, as Dad's Group, we're working, you know, I guess on this integrated model of care for fathers in the perinatal period, where we're going into hospitals, we're integrating the hospital experience with that paternal experience where the system hasn't done it before. We're integrating with an organisation like PANDA and SMS for Dads. We're bringing those narratives, those stories, those on-ramps, those support pathways into the knowledge realm for new mothers and fathers. We're teaching them how to engage with these systems of support, these services, the phone call, the SMSs, and the programs. Tell us how a new father or expecting father, maybe pre-baby arrival and maybe a post-arrival example, how would they potentially connect with PANDA, and when and why?
Oh, there are so many ways. So, you know, if we look at the pregnancy space, or even before that, when you're planning a bub, you know, I mean, we may have people, and we do have people who call our helpline who talk about the fact that they, you know, were concerned before they got pregnant as they were starting the preconception phase or, you know, the having a go phase and not yet pregnant, that they were, you know, concerned about what might come. And, you know, we would really love for that to be a point at which people are connecting with PANDA, you know, as an organisation of many, you know, and we partner with so many organisations, including, you know, Dad's Group and SMS for Dads and all of the other important platforms. But, you know, I think being armed with information and starting the normalisation process, so understanding what is normal and what isn't, and, you know, how we're kind of set up culturally to support dads is really important. So for dads who are in that sort of planning or pregnancy phase that have a flag going off, that is, you know, either concerned about how they're going to navigate that space or how they're going to, you know, find it difficult in that space. And, you know, first and foremost can reach out to PANDA via our website, and our website is a really great space to start. Our front page has a, you know, who are you? You click you're a dad and it'll take you straight through to the dad resources. And, you know, we have a range of tools and fact sheets that are available. We have a range of real life experiences and stories from people who have, you know, either used PANDA or gotten involved with PANDA after the fact. That are sharing what normal looked like to them, noting that normals are different for everyone. And we also have an amazing checklist. So we translated with our community a checklist that's 30 questions that explores sort of thoughts, feelings and behaviours and some relationship stuff. And gives you a bit of a read on what you're experiencing and whether or not you benefit from reaching out to somebody. It gives you something really tangible, so you can print out the sheet that comes out of the checklist at the end and take it to a friend or a GP or you know, a family member to have the conversation, because we know that sometimes, you know, our dad callers will express that they didn't know how to put into words what it was that they were experiencing. You know, it was a new thing for them and felt stupid having a conversation when they couldn't describe it. So sometimes those sort of tools are really powerful.
I really, sorry, just I resonate with that message. Like having our first child before, you know, we didn't have the planning phase. We had the, oh my goodness.
Yeah. Whoops.
And so for me, not knowing how to articulate my feelings and not actually being able to accept that my feelings are valid and that they could be spoken to anyone about was absolutely a core issue for me. And the reason why, you know, Dad's Group started was the only place I felt comfortable sharing that was someone who shared a similar experience or a peer environment. So it's great to know that PANDA is, you know, open to having those conversations, especially if you don't have another, you know, a peer group environment like a Dad's Group. If you're isolated geographically or mentally otherwise, then there is that access to support. Sorry, go ahead. I just wanted to just outline that from my experience, it is the challenge of actually articulating your feelings when you're not feeling well is it's a high wall that I've never been able to get across.
Yeah, and it's either being able to articulate your feelings or finding the right time. They're the two things that we often hear as the barriers, and they're self-imposed barriers. So they're things that we throw in front of ourselves like stop sticks to slow ourselves down, you know. And I think, you know, we break down that having the right words piece, but the timing piece is something that we cannot break down for people, you know, and you hear it all the time, whether it's around mental health and vulnerability or issues in a relationship, and people say, oh, I'm waiting for the right time to have the conversation, or I'm waiting for the right time to go to the GP, or, you know, and the reality is you get one crack at this life, you know, don't waste your time. If you feel it, think it, do it, you know, and that's where organisations like PANDAs are great, because, you know, whilst I would never want community to feel they need to cover up an exploration for help or, you know, seeking support, our website and our checklist, no one needs to know you're doing it. You can do it 24/7. You know, you can engage with the resources and have the time away from everyone to be able to process and reflect on, you know, think about what it is you've just seen on the website or got from the checklist, and then work out where to next, you know. And I think that's why tools like PANDAs that are really down to earth and getting more down to earth, you know, our learning hub where you can do community education around perinatal mental vulnerability, you know, and connect with some of the resources is really important. And that there, you know, there's no better time than the moment that you're thinking about it and doing it. And then, the other tool that's there, if you are experiencing real vulnerability or, ups and downs, and you do want to talk to somebody live, is ring the helpline. And Panda has a great helpline via 1300 726 306. And we're available Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. till 7:30 p.m. People do have to leave a message because we're slammed all the time, with callers, and that's unfortunate. But we do get back to people too. And, we've got some great counsellors, both people with lived experience and with clinical experience, that can unpack what it is you're going through, give you a read on whether or not, you need some further support, or provide follow-up while you're waiting to get into local support. And that's really cool. And whether you're pregnant or in the first 12 months of having a bub, the range of offerings that Panda has are very much the same. Our website's a really cool resource. We've got the checklist there for mums and dads. The helpline's available, and we educate health professionals to have open conversations. And there's tools there that you could take to a GP. If you've got a great GP who you think may not get this stuff, you can take along some of the resources or share the website. And unfortunately, we do at times have to upskill the health professional community because they're across so many things. So I think those are the tools and resources that we have. But we also have partners, that we readily engage with and work to support community through, like SMS for Dads and, the Mum Mood Booster and the like. And that's good. We're seeing a real shift, and we aren't seeing more dads reaching out to the helpline, and more dads reaching out to the helpline for their own wellbeing rather than seeking support for their partner, which is so encouraging and supporting.
Yeah, great, because there's definitely that cohort of fathers who are made aware in our Dads Group antenatal sessions that they can call Panda if their partner's not well. But as you're saying, there's obviously a change in culture in that fatherhood space to being, accepting that I can call Panda for me.
Yeah.
And we also know that if I'm, as a new father, feeling mentally better, I'm going to be able to be better support and care for my partner, for my family, for my child, my infant, and for my broader community. So getting it right and healthy, getting our mind right, body, mind and soul right in that perinatal period is so hard. And it's nice to say get it all right, but there are little basic steps, from going for a walk, calling Panda, having a chat to someone that really make a difference. Julie, thank you so much for sharing those insights today. It's been to hear your journey. We've got a couple of minutes left where anyone, or Scott or Blair, may want to ask you some questions. But apart from that, we just want to say thank you. It's been wonderful to hear who you are as a CEO, but also who you are as a human and a community member of this perinatal community of support.
Thank you. And it is, it's so great to have these conversations. And as you said at the beginning, the yarn is really important because the yarn, doesn't end here. And, we are all connected, whether it's through these kind of mediums or whether or not we bump into each other on the street. And, we are people that are just trying to navigate a space and trying to get things right, So, yeah, it's cool. These conversations are good.
Awesome. Blair, over to you if you've got anything to share there. Or Scott, have you got any questions for Julie while we have her?
I get the opportunity to talk to Julie. As she said, her door is always open to me, so I take advantage of that when I need to. But I think it was really great, and just for me, sitting back, it is a new space to me, and I think the thing that really resonated to me with Julie's talk was about that trust, and the trust between the mum and dad, and the mum giving over, because we're developing. One of my roles is perhaps in a couple of weeks I'm able to come and let everybody know a little bit more about it, but it is really about that messaging for helping mums to, I suppose, develop that trust and how to give over. Is certainly one of the themes that I'm finding in the feedback that we've been getting is a really big issue. So it was really good to hear Julie's thoughts on that.
Sorry, I realised I was muted. It's good now. She's not snoring, so it's going to be easier for me to chat. I've got a very sick little girl here at the moment. Yeah, I loved that conversation. I loved what you brought up about the fear elements of parenting. And I 100% have felt that and feel that on a regular basis. And like, so for my situation now, like, so my wife's away for a week. I've got 3 sick kids and I'm trying to work and all that sort of stuff. And then, you good? Yeah. And it's hard, and there's that whole fear creeps in because like I get overwhelmed, I'm tired, I haven't been sleeping well, and that fear of how I've been reacting, or that the fear is like, because I've reacted badly on points this week, it's like, oh no, now I've really damaged my kids, and now I've lost their trust, they're going to remember this for the rest of their lives, like all this sort of stuff. So that fear thing that you're talking about like just really hit home for me, and I really appreciate you saying that, Julie. And that's been, I remember before having kids, that was my biggest struggle, was like this fear of that I'm going to be a crap dad, and or this fear that I'm going to damage my kids and all that sort of stuff. And so I really appreciate you saying that. The other thing is that I've been with Dad's Group since Christmas Day pretty much, last year, and I met you, Julie, at the PBC Expo up in Brisbane at the beginning of the year. And that was awesome because the insight that I got to Dad's Group, but then I got the insight to SMS for Dads, I got the insight to Panda, was that it's not about Panda. It's not about SMS for Dads, not about Dad's Group. It's about trying to bring that change and those resources to dads and mums in Australia. And so my question was, and this is, I didn't prepare you for this one because it came up to me as you were talking, was why is partnership so important to you? Because that's something that I've really admired through the 3 organizations that are represented here today. And this wasn't planned for SMS Dads to be in this call. So that's really cool that you're here, Scott. But why is that so important to you, that collaboration?
Oh, look, I think for many reasons. And firstly, I'll just, lay it out there, because it's about choice for people. So, I believe that the best possible health system and the best possible experience that anyone will get from a health system is one where they have choice, because choice allows them to trust in their decision making, and choice allows people to trust in the system to hold them. And that can never come from one organisation alone. So I think, we need to build a health system whereby people have the choice around where they receive care and support. And that's coming, it's something we all need to work on. I think secondly, it is that none of us can do it alone, nor should we ever do it alone, because that's not how helping organisations thrive. Helping organisations thrive because we hand over and give over some of that trust, because we call each other to account and make sure that we're doing the best with taxpayers' money. And, making sure that we understand our strengths and our weaknesses. And, as an organisation, Panda has a really big brand and reputation, and people trust us, and we're so proud of that. But we're not the experts at everything. We have our space. We have our jam that we love to work on, but we want others to thrive and wrap around us. And, we want to be a part of a rich fabric which has a warp and a weft, and every bit of that, fabric is another organisation or another community group or another elder or whomever somebody wants to receive support from. So I think, it is really important that we partner, and that we partner openly and authentically. And, partnerships can at times be competitive. Partnerships can at times allow one to step forward and another to step back in the dance of, the relationship. And all of that needs to be tolerated. But partnership is fundamental, and it's all, again, about trust.
Yeah, definitely. That was great. Thank you.
Thanks, Julian. Thanks for that question, Blair. I think it's really feeds well into that giving over kind of theme that we've had here. And nice, Scott, that you're working on elements of that in the SMS for Dads space as well. And I know that in the Dads group sessions that we have, there's ongoing continuous dialogue around this. And one of the examples that a dad gave was, the first time he came to Dad's group with his child, it came before the child arrived, but the first time with the child, it was a distressing, challenging for him and his partner, but probably more for his partner in that giving over. She wasn't fearful for the child's safety, nor, that the partner could do it. It was just a milestone in their relationship of trust that you're talking about. And it was a healthy milestone. And having spaces and places where you can, the point around that giving over, might be raised in a PANDA conversation, might be substantiated more, Scott, through SMS for dads and some of the narrative and the talk, the messages that will come through there. And then there might be a place where that can actually translate into a practical outcome for a new family as they go to a dad's group. And that, to your point, Blair, around how do partnerships work, that is the working of a healthy, effective partnership. And we don't need to all do every part of the puzzle, but if we work together, we can actually show, together, collectively, how we all do our little bit, and how our little bit together pushes each new father and family along the spectrum towards where they want to be as parents and as instrumental people in their community. So thank you, everyone.
Can I just pick up on something around that too? Sorry, Tom. There's something too, just closing the loop on what Blair said about, that fear as well, and the fear around the way in which you're parenting in this moment where, you're alone and you've got 3 sick kids, and are you doing it well? I think, that it's the same kind of intent as partnership as well. And that is, you're in a partnership with those little people, especially that little one right now who's on your lap. And understanding that, partnerships have strengths and weaknesses, and the biggest gift you can give your kids right in this moment is the fact that you will mess it up sometimes, and that you may get overwhelmed sometimes, but you're not going to stop loving them, and that you're going to be there. And I think, teaching kids that is what life is about, not to the extreme of harming our children ever, or, really significantly disrupting them. And there's always that, no-go zone, but, to show your kids that you're going to be tired and, you're going to be overwhelmed, and that's okay, is really important, I think, because that builds them, up and gives them that self-trust and self-identity, and knowing that, near enough's good enough.
If after listening to this episode you would like to contact PANDA's helpline, please call 1300 726 306. If you'd like to find out more about PANDA or Dad's Group, or join a digital Dad's Group session, which is where these podcast episodes are recorded, or connect with some of our amazing partners, check out our website at www.dadsgroup.org. We'll link it in our podcast notes for you guys. Please remember to like, subscribe and review, and please share with any dads and families that may benefit from hearing this podcast. Cheers guys, appreciate it.